Hello everyone. Good morning. Thanks for everyone who's come and joined in with our Q&A this morning. My name's Andrew, if you don't know me, and I'll be asking Danny some questions. Danny, thanks so much for the talk this morning.
It's a pleasure, Andy.
Great passage. It is a really amazing passage. You can see why it's so famous and well known. It is amazing grace. I think I was really struck by that this morning, just how, as you were saying, the Christian gospel is completely unique in just how amazing the grace of the Father is. So thanks so much for just the way you've brought that passage out. It was great. Did you enjoy preparing for it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's such a familiar passage. Even the title. In my Bible, it's the title of the lost son. Even that kind of that phrase kind of sends you off in a particular direction. I think it was doing the work on last week's passage and seeing the importance of verses 1 and 2 as setting the scene for the whole chapter. Luke says Jesus told them this parable, singular, and then it's followed by 3 parables: the sheep, the coin, and the sons. And it's 3 parables for the price of 1. They're kind of saying the same thing, but when you get to the 3rd parable, you realize there is a difference, and that's where the rubber really hits the road. And I thought in Simon's introduction this morning, he brought out the significance of verses 1 and 2 very helpfully, that there is this kind of, the key thing is, where are you in that gathering? Are you listening to Jesus, or are you criticizing? So yeah, I mean, I think when you hit a very familiar passage as a preacher, I'm always slightly fearful. I don't want to kind of I don't want to assume everyone's heard it before. I don't want to be kind of creative just for the sake of finding new things. But I find when you do look at it, you do see things freshly. And it was that, I suppose, verses 1 and 2 leading us to see this as a story of 2 sons. And actually, the real weight, I think, Jesus puts is on the 2nd son. That's really why he's telling the story, because he wants the Pharisees to understand his mission, understand why he has come for these people who are gathering around him.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where the challenge partly comes out for the Christian who's familiar with the gospel. Have we forgotten that we are lost and found? Have we ended up? And I think this is where it's hard in terms of applying it. Because you don't want to say to people, you are the older brother, because the older brother is really lost. But there is an attitude of the older brother that creeps into our hearts and into church life as well, I think.
Yeah, and it was interesting to see how actually both the younger brother and the older brother, they both end up in a similar place in concluding that all the best they can get out of the Father is to sort of work to earn Father's love.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was interesting, you kind of showed that really neither of them knew their Father, because so actually none of us really know God until we come face to face and see that amazing grace.
Yeah, and that's why that little note of the comparative religion thing that I did, I hope I did that quite kind of gently in a way, but it's such human nature to want to and to expect to work your way up. So the gods of the religions of the world, they're about making us grovel to one extent or another. Whether it's the sort of the rules I've got to keep, or the particular clothing I've got to wear, or the prayer rituals I've got to do a certain number of times a day, or the bodily things I've got to perform, and the dietary things. All of these are ways that the religions of the world make us pay. Even if there is a certain amount of forgiveness. Actually, the Christian gospel says you can't pay, and God is a God of grace, who does it all for us.
Yeah. Let's go back to last week. So it was really helpful having all three of those parables next to each other, as they should be. So someone asked a question about in last week's passage we had the lost coin and the lost sheep, and they stay lost until kind of Jesus goes to find them, sort of thing. But in this passage we had the son kind of coming to his senses, and he goes to the Father. So it's kind of like he's doing a bit of the work. So is there a difference there?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think there's two things really, or a couple of things to say. One is, that's absolutely right. That this is, I think, the first two parables are giving us the sort of the whole picture of salvation from God's point of view. So that He is the shepherd, He is the woman going to seek, and as Simon reminded us this morning as well, the effort, the 100% diligence of the Saviour is on view. The third parable of the lost sons, it does give us that same story of salvation from the human angle. So there is a sense in which when we experience God's salvation, part of the experience is our own awakening from the pigsty, our own decision, and I use the word decision this morning deliberately, the decision to turn back to God. But you can't mistake that decision and that awakening and that journey back for something that is meritorious on our part, or something that is part of sort of meeting God our way. You can't mistake that in the context, because Jesus has already made it abundantly clear in the first two parables. And remember, Luke has kind of bunched them together very specifically. He's made it very clear that the lostness is complete. And therefore, if you read it in that context, our decision to go back to God, our repentance, is actually the result of his prior seeking. And I think the other thing is worth saying is, I think that one of the reasons I spent quite a long time on the son's decision in verse 19 is because it is flawed. It's he realizes, and I think this is something I'd perhaps not noticed when I've preached on this before, he realizes his mistake. He is miserable in the pigsty, but actually, even when he returns to the Father, he's not really returning for the sake of the Father. He's kind of a little bit self-seeking, and he still hasn't understood the grace of God. So even in our turning back to God, there's a sense in which we get it wrong, and God has to completely save us.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, I was thinking that was very new for me as well, and seeing that he's not even saved at the point when he realizes he has to go back. And he's not even saved just by going back to the Father and saying the right thing. He's saved at the point the Father comes to him in grace, and that's the point to say.
Yeah, that's right.
I think there's a couple of questions about how the Father is able to sort of take that shame upon himself then. And I think that was kind of new in thinking about it as well, because we just sort of, I guess, as you were saying, we sometimes just think, oh, he just forgives. But no, you're right. It was very helpful thinking about that in the kind of first century context, that everyone knows his son's done something wrong, kind of deserves to be punished, and just welcoming his son back, he's kind of taken on himself. So can you just explain, how that happens, and also someone's asking, in the story, it's the Father absorbing the wrath, but in the gospel, he's poured out on Jesus. And is that, are those two things kind of the same? So someone's asking, why can God not absorb his own wrath, just like the Father in the story? Can you explain a bit more?
No, I think it's helpful. Well, I mean, I guess there's a kind of a beginning of an answer in Luke 15, And I think that the question has brought that out again, and that's what I was trying to bring out. That this, I think the details in verse 20 are very, very important, and Jesus kind of paints this picture that is really shocking. People often, comment on the fact, a man of this type and this culture would not have run to his son, and that's absolutely true. But that's just part of it. It's the identification that he makes with his son at that point, so that his son doesn't have to walk the walk of shame back to the house to kind of receive whatever he's going to receive from the father. The father, well, just like the shepherd goes to find the sheep where he is, the father comes to the son and walks the walk of shame with him back to the house, and so says to the community around him, this is my son. He's fully accepted. There's not going to be anything to pay. And then the party, the celebration, the fattened calf, the details, the music and dancing. When you have music and dancing in a culture like that, it's like a wedding. It's or a bar mitzvah or a birth or something. It's a big public statement that this son is accepted, and whatever cost or damage he has done to the family, to the estate, to the father's name, it's been absorbed. So in the context of Luke 15, I don't think there's much more to say than that. In the context of the gospel, though, you start kind of drawing this out, and of course there are always these debates in academia and in scholarship. There's a debate that runs all the time about whether Luke has kind of forgotten the atonement here, because these salvation events seem to happen without any atonement. But that's just ridiculous when you start reading it in the context. So Luke 9:51, Jesus says, he's going to Jerusalem. He sets his face to Jerusalem. And then this is all part of that journey narrative where he is setting his face to Jerusalem. So everything that happens between 9:51 and wherever it is he enters Jerusalem, end of chapter 19, I think. Everything that happens in that context is in the context of Jesus accomplishing his mission to seek and save the lost on the cross. So how does the Father absorb the shame of the sinner? It's when Jesus dies on the cross. And I mean, in terms of the second part of the question, why can't God just absorb it? Well, that takes us into the realm of the atonement itself. Isaiah 53, we all like sheep have gone astray. He has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Jesus was the one who stood in our place so that justice can be achieved, and forgiveness as well.
Yeah. And I suppose that's why it's crucial that Jesus is God, one with the Father. He's not sort of laying on someone else. That is, you sort of in the parable you see the Father and the Son together in the character of the Father, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. And 19 verse 10 at the end of the story of Zacchaeus, the Son of Man has come to seek and save the lost. That's Jesus' role, but it's clear right from the beginning of the gospel that he is himself God in the flesh. So that's the only way forgiveness is possible.
Yeah. Got a question about how do we try and be like the Father? So how do we as Christians ensure we truly forgive like the Father and don't spend years punishing those who have wronged us, punishing in subtle ways?
It's a really, really helpful question. I mean, one part of the answer is that we can't, that we are human, and I guess the only things we've got to be in one sense, the sins we've got to be concerned about are the sins against us, aren't they? So we're not God. We're not in a position to forgive people who have sinned against others. We don't have to. That burden would be absolutely intolerable. But when it comes to people who sin against us, Jesus himself does address this, I couldn't think of where he does it in Luke, but in Matthew chapter 18, Peter says that exact question. How many times should we forgive? How many times should I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times. And Jesus says, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77, which of course means, n number of times. And after that, he tells the parable of the unmerciful servant, which is a brilliant kind of answer to this question. Just think how much you've been forgiven. You've been forgiven this massive debt, this infinite debt against God. And that is the means for you to forgive other people. So I think it's a great question. And the answer is really, remember the grace of God in the gospel to you. And that will lead you to put that same grace into practice.
Yeah. You were saying at the end about how this parable should also kind of affect the way we think about church, in kind of not getting stuck in that sort of entitled Christian thinking, but remembering that our Father is the one who seeks and saves the lost. So someone's asked, how do we then balance the need for Christian discipleship against the mission to seek and save the lost?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one thing that struck me, which we didn't really have time to bring out, is the how, if you look again at verses 1 and 2, and you see this kind of quite distinct group of people, and I think I made the point last week that these tax collectors and sinners, they really are not nice people. They're not kind of, we shouldn't romanticize them. Funnily enough, after giving the illustration of the dodgy plumber, we had a drain problem as well, and we were fortunate that we didn't get plumbers like that. But the point is that these are people who really are bad, and this is something quite countercultural, because our culture would say that we've got to accept everybody as they are. And so church must be, if church is going to be this place of diversity, it's got to be a place where people are accepted and their lifestyles are accepted unchallenged. But I think actually Jesus would say people are accepted as they are, and the person is always welcome, but he, through his word, will challenge the lifestyle. And so as you come to Christ, you come as you are, but you don't remain as you are. And so the church is a place of true diversity, because everybody is welcome, absolutely everybody. But we then begin, as we hear the word of God, as we come to Christ, we then begin to help each other to transform and to reject those parts of our lifestyle which don't conform to his ideal. And then there is this kind of circle as well, isn't there? So the question was asking, how do you balance Christian discipleship with evangelism, with the mission? Well, I think there is a really very sort of lovely kind of relationship between the two, because if I'm a disciple of Christ, I will want to be somebody who cares about the lost as he does, because that was his mission. That was what I was trying to say at the end. To be Christ-like is therefore to be somebody who will sacrifice my own comfort for the spiritual good of other people. That, what else does it mean to be Christ-like? That's what he did for us. So as I grow in Christian discipleship, even if I'm not the world's best evangelist, and I might struggle to have gospel conversations, whatever, my desire is that the lost will be found. And so I'll begin to put effort into evangelism as part of my discipleship, even if that effort simply means, as I was trying to allude to at the end, giving up those freedoms or preferences that might suit me in church. That is part of my discipleship, to give those things up for the spiritual good of others, so that they can be saved, so that they then will become disciples of Christ, and the whole circle will keep on going.
Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I think as well, it's coming back to the gospel as we did this morning. It's remembering when Jesus comes to seek and save the lost. in a sense, that still means me. It's not that discipleship is somehow something completely different to hearing the call to repent and believe.
Yeah.
It's hearing that every day, isn't it?
Yeah, I think as Christians, we just, there is a balance, and I kind of understand that. Well, I do understand that, my experience of church and my small group and all the rest of it has got to serve me. It's got to disciple me, and I understand that. But we very easily get kind of turn that into a kind of me-centered demand, that it means it's got to be comfortable. I've got to always be surrounded by my friends. And we very quickly lose sight of the outsider, and as you say, we are the outsider as well, for whom Jesus came.
Yeah, great, thanks, Danny. I think that's answered everything apart from one kind of pair of questions that are similar. So we'll just end with those. And it's just looking at the last couple of verses and the response of the older brother. So one person has asked, what is the kind of right response of the older brother? What should that look like? And someone else has asked, looking at those last two verses, he appears to be, is it just that he's in or out? He appears to still be in a relationship with the Father, even though he's missing out on the party. So I guess maybe that's one to answer first. Is it just that he's totally out? Is there a sense in which he's still in? And what should the right response look like for the older brother?
Yeah, it's a helpful question. Well, I mean, at the level of the parable itself, he's very much, Jesus places him very much on the outside by the end. Spatially, he is physically outside the house, and the Father is trying to call him in. And even relationally, do you notice that he says, where does he say?
Verse 30?
Yeah, sorry, verse 29. I've never disobeyed your orders. But what is he doing right now? The Father has to ask him repeatedly to come inside. He's disobeying the orders. So there isn't the relationship there. And then the other thing is that he distances himself from the Father and the Son. This son of yours. And then the Father comes back in verse 32. This brother of yours. So I think at the level of the parable, it is black and white. I think the Pharisees are on the outside because they're not listening to Jesus. But the beautiful thing is about this, that it ends on that note of unknown. So the story ends with the Father still pleading with the Son to come in. So even now, it's not too late. And of course, some Pharisees did come and did hear. But for them to do that would take they'd have to swallow their pride, because it means calling people like Zacchaeus, the tax collector, later on, a brother, and realizing that it's very, very leveling for them, isn't it? So I think, at the level of the parable, it is black and white, but the level of kind of application to Christians, I think it's a little bit more tricky. It's a little bit less black and white. It's really, and that's why I use the attitude, the language of the attitude of the older brother kind of creeping in, and that's what we've got to be careful of. And the antidote to that is to, I guess, identify yourself with the lost in the first place, and to just be thankful again for the amazing grace of God.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Thanks very much.
Thanks for those questions.
Yeah, those are great, very helpful questions. Thanks, everyone. And I think that is what we need to keep doing, whether we're Christians or not. We do just need to keep coming back to this amazing grace. I think I was really struck by just how often I forget it, how often I sink into thinking I need to pay back God, or I'm just looking for his mercy and forgetting the amazing grace. So yeah, do tune in next week. We're looking at Luke 16, and the title is Happy as Lazarus. And I don't just say that to sort of get you to keep coming back, but this is what we need to keep doing, is we need to keep hearing the gospel. do join a link group if you'd like to. If you're just tuning in and you are interested in joining one of those groups, it's not too late. If you email info@morelands.org.uk, we can put you in a group where you can chat to people about this. So do be doing that this week. Thanks, Danny.
Thanks, Ed. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. I'll let everyone go off and get some lunch, and see you later.
Bye.
Bye.